All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's get into this Stephen A. Smith. And once again, he's floating this idea of running for president. In an interview that he did recently, he actually went straight at the Democrat Party. He was openly critical of their leadership, questioned the strength of their potential candidates, and he even suggested that the party had drifted too far from everyday American. He even gave President Trump credit on certain issues, and that's something you never see from someone positioning themselves anywhere near the Democrat Party in today's political climate. So as always, if you enjoyed the content, smash the thumbs up button. That's the best way to let me know, and subscribe to stay locked in with future videos. Let's get into it. So let's start with the first clip where Stephen A. Smith credits the president for fixing the border crisis and holding Biden accountable. Take a listen.
You're known for your honest, sometimes brutal takes. What's your take, President Trump?
I think that I don't like what I'm seeing, but everything that he does is not wrong. The borders needed to be closed. He was right to do that, but only because Biden opened them. Had Biden followed Barack Obama's method and his plan and what he did in deporting even more people than Trump did in his first term, you wouldn't hear me saying that. But when you let anywhere from 12 to 15 million people cross the border illegally, swearing in our face, spitting in our face and telling us it's raining, figuratively speaking, by telling us there was no border crisis when clearly there was, emergency efforts were necessary. Now, do I like what I'm seeing in the streets of America in terms of ICE grabbing people up, snatching people off the streets, detaining folks? No, I do not. Do I like them saying, hey, we're going after the criminals, and come to find out, your definition of criminals is anybody who crossed the border illegally, as opposed to the impression you gave us that these was real bona fide criminals that was doing harm to American citizens. No, I don't like that either.
Yeah, so you seen and you heard that. And now listen, let's not forget, the president made it clear from day one. You heard Tom Homan repeat it, that while they're prioritizing the worst of the worst, if you entered the country, if you're here in the country illegally, that does not mean you're off the table. You're not. Now listen, Stephen A. Smith, he's going to have his own positions, and that's fine by me as long as he can back them up with facts and common sense. And that's something the Democrat Party hasn't been doing for quite some time now. And that's why somebody like a Stephen A. Smith, at least in my opinion, does stand out. He does. He knows how to talk. He knows how to communicate. And just like Trump, he is an outsider to traditional politics. Now, I know a lot of conservatives would say, that sounds crazy, but I'm old enough to remember when they said the exact same thing about Trump. That's all I'm saying. So I'll take the position that it's possible. Now, there are things he says that I personally couldn't get behind in a candidate, but I can see how he could appeal to a lot of people who traditionally support Democrats or swing voters and believe the party has moved too far left. Matter of fact, let's go into the CNN clip breaking that down, and then we'll come back to more from Stephen A. Take a listen.
The results from that special election, that Democratic primary in the 11th district in New Jersey, speak to a larger point within the Democratic Party, and that is that the far left is significantly more powerful than they once were. This sort of gives the game away here. Democrats who identify as very liberal or conservative. You know, there used to be a lot of conservative Democrats, right? Back in 1999, 26% of Democrats self-identified as conservative. Just 5% said that they were very liberal. It was a smidgen, a smidgen, a smidgen. Now that far left has gained considerably in power. Look at this. Now we're talking about a fifth of Democrats. 21% say they're very liberal. That conservative part of the Democratic Party, adios amigos, goodbye, just 8%. And when you combine the 21% who are very liberal with those who say that they're somewhat liberal, we're talking about 3 in 5 Democrats who identify as either somewhat liberal or very liberal, with the very liberals a much larger portion of the party. The far left, which used to just be a smidgen within the Democratic Party, has gained considerable power, as you saw in New Jersey's 11th district.
What about Democratic socialists, like the likes of, you've got Bernie Sanders or Zoran Mandani here in New York City? Where does that line up?
Okay, so on a separate question where you essentially, CNN asked this last year, which was, okay, Democrats who think of themselves as democratic socialists, among all Democrats, including those independents who lean towards the Democratic Party, look at this. We're talking about a third A third of all Democrats who identify as Democratic Socialists. Bernie Sanders and Zohran Mamdani are not alone. They are a considerable part of the Democratic base at this point. And more than that, if you look at Democrats under the age of 35, they are nearly half of the Democratic Party. Look at this. 42% of Democrats think of themselves as Democratic Socialists under the age of 35, just like Zohran Mamdani. What happened in New York City, is not some aberration, right? It is not something that just happened in New York City. It is something that we are seeing grow within the Democratic Party at this particular point when we're talking about 42% of Democrats under the age of 35 identifying as Democratic Socialists and a third of all Democrats. My goodness gracious.
So if the ideology of the Democratic Party is shifting or changing, how are people feeling about it?
Okay, so we're talking about the Democratic base, right? But what about all Americans, right? How about all voters? Voters who say the Democrats are now too liberal. Look at this percentage. It was 42% in 96, 48% in 2013, now 58% in 2025 of all voters say that the Democratic Party is too liberal. The Democrats are moving to the left, the far left is gaining power, and there could be some electoral repercussions because what we see right now is voters, the clear majority, say that they are too liberal.
This is really interesting. Thanks so much, Harry.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if Democrats want to keep losing elections, then they can keep doing exactly what they're doing. And keep pushing out people like AOC or Gavin Newsom into the forefront. But I don't think that will work. I don't. I mean, hey, we'll see. But let's go to the next clip with Stephen A. Take a listen.
Could you run for president?
It's possible.
Would you run as a Democrat?
Yeah, because I couldn't see myself running as a member of the GOP. I'm a fiscal conservative. I can't stand high taxes, but I'm a social liberal in the same breath because I believe in living and let live. I pay attention to the desolate and the disenfranchised. Yes, I like strong borders. That's absolutely true. We never needed open borders, but we don't need it to be completely closed either. We're a gorgeous mosaic.
Sounds like you're getting a stump speech ready, Stephen.
No, there's no stump speech, but I can give it. I can tell you this much. I can give a speech without a note in front of me.
Could you be competitive in a Democratic primary? Some big names might run. Gavin Newsom, the California governor, among many others.
I respect all of them in terms of their intellect, in terms of where their heart lies, in terms of the service that they want to provide to this country. But ultimately, your actions speak louder than anything. Gavin Newsom is somebody that I think has tremendous potential if he moves towards the center. But ultimately, affordability with taxes in the state of California, the homelessness, the crime, he's gonna have to answer those questions, being a prisoner of the environmentalist out there. He's gonna have to answer those questions.
I can tell you right now, if Democrats push out Gavin Newsom as their candidate in the next election, Republicans would take that matchup 7 days a week and twice on Sundays. Guaranteed. So Stephen A. is right on that point that Newsom would have to answer for California, the economy, the crime, the homelessness crisis, the business exodus. And that's not an easy defense when you're trying to win over people in the middle. I'm not talking about the base. I'm talking about the swing voters, independents, suburban moderates, the people who actually decide elections. And so that is a problem. Newsom may energize the Democrat base, but that doesn't automatically translate into national appeal. You know, those voters in the center are going to want to ask practical questions, and they're going to want practical answers. And so if Democrats choose him, they would be doing Republicans a favor. But let's move to the next part where Stephen A. talks about defund the police and race in America. Take a listen.
But make no mistake about it, we wouldn't have a border crisis under my watch. Hell no. We wouldn't have this crime that exists in the streets of New York. You wouldn't hear about me saying defund the police. We ain't defunding any police. I'm calling 911 when there's a problem. I know you're calling 911 when there's a problem. I'll be damned if I'm gonna have less police officers out there. There's gonna be more. That's me.
How would you handle race if you got into the contest?
I would be who I am.
Would you worry about racism if you ran for president?
No. I know it exists. I know that you can't escape it, but I do not believe it is as prevalent as some on the left would like us to believe. I do believe a vast majority of Americans judge you on the content of your individual character rather than the color of your skin. I think a lot of people in America, especially in this day and age, now more so than ever before, It's not about race. It's about the fact that they don't give a damn about it because they got their own problems. That's entirely different than believing they are superior to you and they want to hold you back from ascending. That's not what's going on to the degree that it was decades ago. What's going on now is that we have more white Americans and others suffering and worried about the state of our nation. And because they're concerned about that, that's where their worries lie.
Yeah, so this is strictly my personal opinion, and I'm basing it off of a few things I've seen from Stephen A. Like when he was critical of Jasmine Crockett, and at first he didn't back down, but then not long after, he must have gotten a call from somebody, the NAACP or whoever, because suddenly he was on his show apologizing. And so I say that to say this. I think Stephen A. probably aligns more with Republican messaging than he lets on. But he also understands how complicated that would be if he actually ran, especially considering how he's perceived within parts of the black community. That's the reality. There are already people who accuse him of being a traitor or say that he tap dance and that sort of thing. And that's based off his sports takes. Imagine the reaction if he ran as a Republican, even though we have more black Americans finally opening their eyes to who the Democrats really are. Still, because when you listen to what he's talking about, a lot of it sounds like traditional Republican themes: law and order, rejecting defund the police, judging people by content of their character rather than identity categories. Meanwhile, much of the modern Democrat messaging leans heavily into identity politics. And so the real question becomes, is the Democrat Party even in a place where it would accept the brand Stephen A. is trying to offer? Because right now, the energy inside the party seems much more aligned with the Mamdani's, AOC, Democrat Socialist wing. That's all I'm saying. But let's get into the last part with Stephen A. Take a listen.
I would focus on a flourishing economy and making sure we did everything we could, because I believe when you have something to lose, you know how to behave. When you have something to lose, you know how to behave. If you have nothing, you have nothing to lose. Nothing to lose. And as a result, you're willing to tear down anything, even if it's America, because you feel betrayed by a country that's supposed to be looking out for you and positioning you to thrive instead of wallow in misery and suffering. So of course I would pay attention to the economy. I would pay attention to all of those things. But I think in the end, when I look to answer your question directly about President Trump, everything he does is not wrong. But a lot of things he's done is not right. I don't know about the tariff wars, okay? I think ICE and their behavior is excessive. Are you looking out for small businesses in this country? That makes up a chunk of our economy. How much have you been padding your own damn wallets? How many deals overseas are you gonna make? We get these pledges, where's the proof? Is the money coming? Is it really gonna stir the economy the way you say it will? Why hasn't the war in Russia, between Russia and Ukraine, been resolved yet? You said you resolved it on day one. That hasn't happened. So there's a lot to complain about when it comes to him. I just don't believe that the way to go about addressing it is denigrating and excoriating our commander-in-chief when he's the one that 77 million plus people voted for to represent the United States of America. I think it's counterproductive, and I think ultimately it works against us.
Yeah, and so you heard that. And I think that if Stephen A. actually ran, he'd probably be the strongest candidate Democrats could put forward. Mainly because of his appeal to swing voters and those in the middle. And let's be honest, those are the voters, yes, who decide elections. Now, a lot of this will depend on how Trump leaves office and the condition the country is in at that point, in my opinion. If things are running smoothly, policies are landing, and the economy is flourishing, then yeah, Democrats are probably cooked. Whether it's JD or Rubio, we'll see. But if Democrats win the midterms and spend the rest of Trump's term blocking his agenda, slowing momentum, and shaping the narrative heading into 2028, then it becomes a very different political landscape. That's just the reality. But we'll see how that all plays out. Let me know what you think. Drop your comments down below. As always, you enjoy the content, smash that thumbs up button. That's the best way to let me know. And subscribe to stay locked in with future videos. And as always, until next time.